Home life was difficult, really difficult, because I wasn't home and my wife did everything. She raised my oldest son by herself for the first year or so of his life. I was an absentee parent and it was stressful across the board.
The world is obsessed with fast track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight, but let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Matt Tucker is Senior Vice President of Squarespace and the Head of Tock, a leading provider of online reservations, table management, takeout, and event solution specifically for the hospitality industry. Prior to Squarespace, Matt was the President and Chief Operating Officer of Olo, a SaaS provider to the restaurant industry. During Matt's almost 9 years at Olo, he helped grow the company from 10 employees and approximately $2 million in revenue to a 700 employee company doing nearly $200 million in revenue. In March 2021, Matt helped lead Olo's successful public offering on the New York Stock Exchange. Immediately prior to Olo, Matt was the Chief Operating Officer of Prove.com, the leading provider of identity tokenization and passive cryptographic authentication solutions. Prior to that, Matt was the founder and CEO of Relay Software and on the founding team of LendingTree. Matt has an MBA from Georgetown University and a BA from the University of Michigan. He'll go on and on about that one, I'm sure. Matt is currently on the board of 7shifts and Vita Mojo. I know Matt because I worked as his direct employee for 8.5 years at Olo, and we had a lovely relationship, lots of banter, a lot of good times. But quite truthfully, he taught me everything I need to know in order to grow my career, and I will be forever grateful to him for paving the way for my success at Olo. Because we worked closely together for 8.5 years, Matt and I have a fun, friendly banter, if you will, and hopefully you can pick that up in this recording. Welcome, Matt.
It's been so long. Look at you with the mic in front of you. Look
Is
like
this like old times or what? Matt, what are you currently doing today? Catch me up on life. What's going on with you?
I joined the executive team of Squarespace last year to run their restaurant reservations platform called Tock, which is based in Chicago. I'm commuting between New York and Chicago, but it's a very exciting part of the restaurant industry that, I did not experience at Olo. So this is the very high-end fine dining Michelin star restaurants, incredible group of restaurateurs that we are lucky to call our customers. So enjoying that very much. It's great to be back, rolling up my sleeves, traveling, seeing customers, and thrilled to be there and very anxious to continue to grow the company.
Let's back it way, way up.
Okay.
Did you always have a plan to go to college?
I was a good student in high school and I was certain I was going to go to college. I was a cherub, which is their summer high school institute in their journalism program. And so I actually thought there was a chance I would end up at Northwestern in Medill. I was admitted to Northwestern. I actually told my parents I'm going to go to Northwestern. And the next morning I woke up and I said, "No, fuck it, I'm going to Michigan." And that was amongst the many good decisions I've made in my life, certainly one of the best.
Shade to Northwestern.
No, Northwestern's an amazing school. And actually, when I tell people my kids' age that I turned down Northwestern, they all call me an idiot because Northwestern's an amazing school.
As much as I want to dive into you being a cherub, I'm going to skip that.
It is fun. I wasn't cherubic. I was just a cherub, which is the program. It's not even the name. It's like the unofficial name. It's embarrassing, but I embrace it.
Did you know what you wanted to major in?
I wanted to be a poli-sci and history major. I grew up in DC, so politics is, I wouldn't say it's in my blood, but it surrounded me. And so I always found it interesting. I was the editor of my high school newspaper, and I wanted to stay in journalism. I was a good student. I wasn't a good student in college, but there were many classes I enjoyed. But I never took a business class in college. And so I didn't know anything about the business world. I was an intern there for 2 years in college. After 2 years of working construction and basically jackhammering and doing unskilled labor for several summers in Washington, D.C. It's a very hot and humid place, and that is not a fun job. Like I said, I wanted to be in the journalism and media world, but I applied too late to get a writing job. And so I ended up in their marketing department doing public relations type of work. I got hired by U.S. News directly out of college. I made $16,000 a year, even adjusted for inflation, but I enjoyed it. We had the first U.S. war in Iraq when I was there, and it was fascinating working, in sort of the media world at that time. And no, I loved it, but I left to go to
was
grad
that
school.
in New York?
No,
Or
in DC.
DC?
No. So when I graduated Michigan, I moved back to DC and went to work for U.S. News. And
So
they
you
had a
did
New
that
York
for 4
office.
years,
I did that for 4 years or 5 years, something like that.
88 to 92.
That's 4 years. Yeah. Then I
Yeah.
entered Georgetown for business school. Like I said, I had never taken a business class in my life. When I was at U.S. News, I was on the business side because I, was no longer going down sort of a journalist path. And I realized that I had no idea what business was or what it was like or what people were talking about. And I realized I had to just cut ties with my old life and not go part-time, but go full-time, be a full-time student once again, and, be serious about school and try to learn what business was all about. I really, like I said, I was blind to that side of the world completely.
So instead of achieve the journalist role that you'd initially wanted for yourself, you decided that the business route was more well suited to you?
Yeah, I knew and know that I'm a really good writer, but I was not a great reporter. When I worked at the Michigan Daily, I had to cover the suicide of a student at Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was just a horrible thing to have to go talk to the parents of a student who committed suicide. And that was when I realized that being a reporter and having to cover things like that was just not something I wanted to do. But being relentless and a lot of the characteristics I have, I just couldn't bring them to cover this suicide, which I could fly to Ann Arbor and walk you to the building where it happened. I still remember it vividly.
Did it make it, I don't know if easy is the right word, but did it make it easy to let go of the dream you had and move forward? It just felt more like a clean break because of that?
Growing up in DC, when I grew up, which is many, many years ago, I remember Watergate, and journalists in DC were heroic figures. So giving up that dream, I don't think was easy. I know I never looked back. So I gave it up and I moved on. And I know I wanted to stay in the media world, which obviously didn't happen forever, but staying within the media world or journalism world, but on the business side was something I wanted to do.
You went to Georgetown. Why Georgetown?
A few reasons. I had met my now wife in DC, where she had graduated law school, and so she had a job, so I was not going too far from DC. Number two, my mom worked for Georgetown Law School. She worked there for 40 years. So I went to Georgetown for free. And so you're not going to turn that down, I suppose. So that was helpful for sure.
Did you feel prepared for business school?
That's a good question. I think the answer must be no. I'm sure I was very, very nervous about going. I was not prepared. I was a good student in high school. I was a bad student. I was going to say mediocre. That's not fair. I'd say bad student at Michigan, or indifferent maybe. I loved it. I really thrived in that environment. But going in, I did not know what it meant. Accounting and finance, marketing, strategy. These were new things to me. So it was nerve-wracking, but exciting at the same time. I was ready to embrace the challenge of going back.
And you and Jane were dating or married at the time?
got married spring break of my first year at B school, which was stressful.
Yeah.
Probably
Well, the
more
first
for
year
her
is
than for me.
the first year is the worst, particularly the first half of the first year.
It was bad, very
So
bad.
she, for some reason, decided to stay aboard and get
Well,
married.
that would be a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
And I can't
I'll interview her
possibly
next.
explain that one. You should interview her. You should interview her. Talking about the title of this podcast. There's a perfect fit.
What was the first job following business school?
I went to work for, at the time, one of the largest media companies in the world called Reed Elsevier, which is an Anglo-Dutch publishing company. I went to work for their U.S. trade publishing division. The most famous publication at that company in the trade side was Variety, which is the trade publishing, the trade rag of the entertainment and Hollywood business. I worked in I think it was called the Retail Furniture Group out of Greensboro, North Carolina, that then reported up to Newton, Mass. I enjoyed that job a lot, but there were a few things that happened at that company and in the world, and that were fortuitous, and timing wise sort of led me into abandoning publishing and moving into the world of the internet and software, and all of it happened and coalesced at that job because I moved from ad sales to doing the first websites for that company, for this division, going out and selling the first what were called banner ads at the time. The world of the internet was brand new, and I embraced that. I didn't really know what I was doing, but no one did. Going out there and trying to describe to some of these companies we were targeting about what the internet was going to look like for them and why it was important to set the ball in motion for the rest of my career.
You join LendingTree as Vice President, Sales and Marketing. Because our relationship is just so wonderful, I can be blunt. Was it a small company and that's why you were able to jump from account exec to VP of sales? Or were you just that fucking good?
Well, it was unfortunately the former. So when I was at Reed Elsevier, I worked with the guy doing the early internet stuff, selling some of our publications online, selling advertising around that, working strategically at sort of a group level, thinking about what the future internet businesses that the company wanted to create. At that time, I met this guy who was college buddy that started a mortgage origination business on the internet, which did turn out to be LendingTree. I had just got a mortgage for an apartment I bought, and the process was such a pain in the butt. So when my friend at work told me about what his friend from college was doing, I thought, oh my God, that makes a ton of sense. This is the future of the internet. Publishing is great on the web and it makes sense. Of course, we all look at stuff online today, but transactions on the internet, converting a paperwork intensive process like getting a mortgage to a relatively simple process, doing it online. It's just the joke today. Everyone knows it can be done, and it's relatively simple. There are lots of companies that do it, but it was really incredibly insightful. The founder of LendingTree, who I was fortunate enough to meet, once I told my friend, said he was leaving to join the company, and I said something along the lines of "Take me with you," and I ended up interviewing and got the job as VP of Sales and Marketing. There wasn't a lot of competition, Dan. There were not a lot of people who, I would say I was, I think I was on the founding team of the company. So it was that small. We had a tiny little office in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was the founder, Doug, his wife, Tara, the guy from how I had worked with at Reed Elsevier, Jamie. I think they had one finance person, and I don't know, maybe that was it. And that
you relocated to Charlotte for that?
No, I never relocated. I lived in New York, but as a practical matter, I lived in a motel down the street from LendingTree in Charlotte. I put it in my deal that I would never have to move to Charlotte, but whether or not that was the right call is consigned to history. Who cares? But it really didn't matter. I was on the road seemingly 5 days a week, 24/7. I truly did live out of some shitty flea bag motel down the street from the office. When I was in Charlotte, I was in the office from, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or later. But I was on the road trying to get banks to sign up to participate in this two-sided marketplace that we were building. So I was almost never in New York. That led to a lot of stress. I had just had my first son, and this is true. When I came home on the weekends and I would take him out and push him in his stroller, he would cry himself to sleep because he didn't know who I was or recognize me. It was a very, very, very stressful job. It was exciting as well, so I don't want to downplay that. It was tough because I would call someone up and I would say, "I'm Matt Tucker. I'm calling from Lending Tree, and I want to talk to you about originating mortgages on the internet." And banks would say, "We do mortgage origination in our branch offices, and what's the internet?" That is not a joke. That happened all the time. And now I was lucky enough to find a few bankers who were as curious about the internet as I was, and able to get them on board eventually. But it was early days, really, really early days. So that was fun. That was exciting. That was stressful, and home life was difficult, really difficult, because I wasn't home and my wife did everything. She raised my oldest son by herself for the first year or so of his life. I was an absentee parent, and it was stressful across the board. And that's why I left, by the way. But I mean, eventually I knew it was going to be, there were only a few choices. There was a pretty clear cut. I either stayed at Lending Tree and had no family, or I left Lending Tree and was able to recover my wife and my son. She didn't leave, but it was
getting to a
I'm
breaking
sure
point.
we were not that, of course, absolutely. I mean, you've worked in startups, they're all consuming. And so you have to have an incredible partner. I know you do. And I do. And so she is absolutely. So is Paul, by the way. Let's just be clear on this podcast. She is a saint. And that put a lot of stress on her. And that's not fair. So any success I've had, she is at least an equal participant in that, because she's picked up every other aspect of my life and cleaned up after me in many, many, many ways. So eternally grateful to her for that. She gave me the opportunity to do that stuff, and she's always been supportive. I don't think it's always been easy. But again, for Lending Tree, it's a great company. I'll talk about Doug Lebda for a moment, who's still the CEO of Lending Tree today. They were acquired. They went public. They were acquired by Interactive.
Yeah, well, this is what I wanted to ask you. You had said,
Yeah.
you left basically because it was coming between your family situation. It looks like you
Right.
departed just prior to the IPO.
I did.
So how did that feel? Did you know the IPO was coming?
Left for a few reasons. Number one was family. I just needed to be back in New York, but also, not to sound just like I was focused on that one thing. It was the heyday of the Internet 1.0 era. And like a lot of people, I thought that, wait a minute, I could start my own thing, which I did end up doing. So I left to move back to New York to be with my family, to start my own company. I didn't know the company was going to go public. We had never raised actually $1 of venture capital, but I knew the idea was great. I knew that he was not going to lose. And so it was a tough decision. Not being in Charlotte, I sort of set my own trap in a sense, right? Like by being an executive at that company, but not being really around the table all the time, I had secured my own fate. It was relatively easy. I regretted that decision for years. When I went through periods of being not successful, I could do basic math. I knew what I walked away from, which was, or could have been, a lot of money. And so that was disheartening at times and depressing at times. And also, I loved the company. I liked the people there. I liked what they were doing. But at the end of the day, it was a decision that many years later, I don't regret. It was pretty clear what I was choosing between, and so it had to be done.
So you left and became CEO of Realize
Correct.
Software.
Rely software, that's right. It was originally called rightfreight.com. We were one of the first freight exchanges on the internet. Now, there are many, many freight exchanges today and are very, very successful. What the company was formed to do is to basically match shippers and transportation companies together. So if you had goods to move from city A to city B, we could match you with unused capacity on a plane or on a truck. That's what we raised our original venture capital money for from our first investor, who was RRE Ventures in New York. By the way, I didn't know what a venture capitalist was at the time. I had no connections. I know it's funny to think about that now because I know so many of them. I didn't know what a VC was. Lending back just sent some outbound emails to eventually formed a 25-year relationship with RRE, or a little under that. Right Freight was founded by myself and two other co-founders, one of whom had a long history in the transportation logistics space, who provided some incredible knowledge to the two other founders, myself and another guy who was also a great entrepreneur, really smart and thoughtful guy. Really saw the future, I think, of the internet is even beyond what I had thought of it, the ability to connect people around the world. He was very thoughtful about that. And so it was a good start to what became a very, very bumpy ride. But it was a good beginning, and it was an exciting time to start your own company for sure.
You left LendingTree April 99, and then you started the company in May. It makes it look like, oh, we just started a company. I left, and a month later, this company was formed. What went into starting that company? How did you come upon the co-founders? How did the three of you decide that you were the CEO and the others held whatever roles they held? And
when I knew I was going to leave LendingTree, I spent time figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I was trying to understand, again, it's really hard to, depending on the age demographic of your listenership, this is going to be tough for people to understand unless they are my age or slightly younger and understand that the internet was nothing. I had to teach my wife how to shop on the internet, and God knows I've regretted that
that was a
decision
mistake.
every day since. One of the largest regrets of my life. Oh my God. So before I left LendingTree, I thought, okay, what am I going to do next? And I literally printed out the SIC codes of every industry. And I would carry that list of SIC codes with me on the plane around the country. And I would look at every one of those, and I would basically say to myself, how will the internet disrupt this industry? If I knew anything about the industry, how will the internet disrupt this industry by SIC code? Now, today you can look at that list and probably everything has been disrupted by the internet. But at the time, you could go through it and get creative. And transportation and logistics, it's a massive TAM, massive. And it was pretty easy to see that the internet would wreak havoc in that business, that it would allow for opportunities that had never existed before to a very large extent. I worked on that with one of my co-founders who had worked for me at LendingTree. And he had a friend from high school, maybe, who had been in the logistics business. And the three of us got together and brainstormed this a lot and came up with the idea. And that was it. We were off and running pretty quickly.
Okay. And so then go back, you were starting to talk about how things weren't necessarily rainbows and sunshine forever.
Well, I don't know how much time we have on this. So yeah, to make a long story short, that company went through multiple pivots. The original plan was to use software to match calls really on trucks or planes to goods that shippers had to move. Again, you want to move a product from city A to city B. We would match you with trucking companies, freight airlines that had capacity. But the reason we couldn't make it work is because back in those days, it was very different. There was no Google. There were no keyword searches. There was no organic or inorganic search. And what that meant was our CAC to LTV, our customer acquisition cost to to the value of the customer, to the lifetime value or whatever, however you want to define it, was completely screwed. So in other words, we built this pretty elegant piece of software, but we had a very inelegant way of getting shippers. We basically hired a lot of freight brokers and brought them into our office and put them on phones to call their contacts. So this was Potemkin village, if you will. We had this great front end software. It was really beautiful, but we really had just regular dial for dollar salespeople in the background who would call their contacts from the freight world, get them online, say, hey, I know you move products from Dallas, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona. We have all these open legs on these trucks or on these planes or whatever the case may be. And, you should consider giving us some of your shipments and allow us to post them up here online. And that was an inelegant and inefficient way of going about doing it, but there was no alternative really.
Yeah, those were the times.
People weren't going online looking for this stuff. Again, there was no Google. There was no way to advertise. There was no way to do any of these things. So we were a software solution. I wouldn't say we were looking for a problem to solve. We would have had product market fit. We had product market fit, except the market didn't know about it, right? There was no way to tell them. That we did the old fashioned thing. We hired the sales team with experienced freight brokers. We went to the right trade shows. We advertised in physical hard copy magazines if we needed to. We built the right board of advisors, but it was tough. And that model we knew was not going to work over time. So we pivoted the company from this freight matching service to a pure play, what we would now call a SaaS company that was focused on transportation visibility. The easiest way to think about it is if you are tracking a package on FedEx, you could see that it was picked up and then it went to this warehouse and then it went to this truck and then it was dropped at your front door. We provided a service like that, but what is called for multimodal transportation. So your package went from the manufacturing facility onto this rail car, onto this barge, onto this ship, onto this plane, onto this truck, to this warehouse, etc. We built, I'd say, the first or one of the first pure SaaS or hosted companies providing this kind of software. And that was pivot number one. At the same time, we were going through that pivot. We were focusing on a specific area, which was chemical logistics. We pivoted into that world, chemical and process manufacturing. And then we had 9/11 happen, and that did lots of things beside the obvious tragedy, beside the effect on New York, where we were based. Global transportation shut down. This is when I learned what a RIF was, Deanne, and this is when I did several RIFs, and this is when I ended up firing tons of people and firing my two co-founders. So I'm not sure I ever answered the question why I was CEO. I guess just because, I don't know if the other guys didn't want to be. I fired my co-founders. We fired a ton of people. The good news is we saved the company. We saved a lot of jobs, which I'm very proud of, but those were amongst the most incredibly tense times of my life. Very, very tough to even go to sleep. It was incredibly stressful. Sitting up worrying about, my employees and how am I going to support them and my employees' kids and my own kids. And I had cut my salary back to very, very little. And so it was incredibly stressful. It was very, very dark days. I was fortunate enough to have support from the RE folks and Stu Ellman, who I think and they were incredibly helpful. Most of my other VCs abandoned me and the company. And in retrospect, it's not hard to blame them. There didn't seem to be a good outcome on the horizon. There was a great outcome in the end for RE. It took a long, long time. But again, we had built a really strong product, had great IP. We had some great people, but the sleepless nights, the stress, the having to fire two co-founders and all the.
Did they see it coming?
No, no. One of them maybe, and one of them was a very different situation and very tough. And I don't think they talked to me for a decade. But I'm not saying I blame them, but it was like extremely hard. So I was made it through the fire there, but it was not something I would wish on anyone.
And your offices were in New York? Where?
We were on 35th between 5th and 6th. I remember those days very, very vividly. And, what the company, obviously what the country went through, all of the nightmare stories, but then what we went through as a company as well, and how we were able to survive that time. By the way, and all of my investors who did not reach out, did not ask how we were, did not seem to care. That was the beginning of a very, very tough period, not just for New York, for the country, for the company. Again, I mean, imagine being the transportation business and global trade is really shut down. The airports are closed. Goods are not moving.
Yeah, that's right. It eventually got acquired by Odyssey. Was that while you were still there?
Yeah. So I had been trying to sell the software to a chemical company at the time called Union Carbide, and trying to sell the visibility software to their transportation logistics team. And it turned out that they were going through their own transition. They had been acquired by Dow Chemical. And finally, I went back to the logistics team at the former Union Carbide and said to the leadership team there, hey, forget about buying and licensing the software from us. You should buy the company. We should combine the logistics arm of Union Carbide with the software team that we have and build a 4PL, which is a tech-enabled third-party logistics provider. And to make a very, very long story short, they agreed. It took a long time, but we formed Odyssey Logistics. And then from there, I departed. I learned a lot, Dan. I'm not sure I would wish that period of time and that stress on anyone.
A question that I wanted to ask you is, did you feel prepared for the C-suite? But I think in those circumstances, no one feels prepared for the C-suite.
Yeah, I was fortunate. It's a good question. We made up our own C-suite, just to be clear, right? Like if you looked at the aggregated C-suites of all the internet 1.0 companies, which I would put Rely Software in that world, I don't know what percent of those people were qualified. They were the C-suite. They made themselves qualified. I know I came out of that experience very qualified, having gone through all the trials and tribulations. But I was fortunate. I had some good supporters. I had some excellent people who are now incredible execs. I also had an amazing mentor and board member named Larry Bossidy. And at the time, he had just left GE, where he was the, I think, co-chair of GE. And when he was on my board, he was the CEO of Honeywell. And so I learned a lot from him. I don't think that made me a great C-suite executive necessarily, but it started me down that path and gave me a little bit of a push down the hill. I just learned a lot from him in the limited amount of time I spent with him. Just how to focus, how to run a business, how to execute, how to choose or understand what's important, what's not, how to focus on talent. Was I best choice for CEO of Rely Software? Probably, because we have a ton of other choices. Was I qualified to be the CEO of a company? Probably not. But I don't know, probably more so than a lot of other people were qualified to be CEOs of their company. I founded the company. I was going to be the CEO anyhow, qualified or not. And I went through those trials and tribulations and came out the back stronger for sure.
Why didn't you stay following the acquisition?
Well, I don't want to work for Dow Chemical, or not Dow Chemical, but a company that had some of the DNA of two big chemical companies. I was not interested in that. I was interested in being in the startup world. I'm not a logistics expert, and that's what their team is.
Where did you go after Rely?
I went to work for a company that's not on my LinkedIn because I didn't like it. I didn't like the CEO, and I should have walked from that company before I ever started. It was run by a guy who I don't even remember how I found them, to be quite frank. I tried to block that job out from any mental space in my head. I ran sales and marketing there. It was a poorly run company in a niche market that was, I don't think, solving a particularly interesting problem. And I know long after I left, they went through a bunch of attrition. The CEO was fired. I believe they were sued by their biggest customer, which was Best Buy. I don't remember what the circumstances were. I try to block that time from my life. There is nothing redeeming about my time there. Don't have a ton of life lessons, but I do say that to the extent you could put blinders on from time to time, it's reasonable. The CEO, even before I started, tried to renegotiate my deal. So that should have been the first sign. And certainly it would be today. And that, I'd say, set the tone for my time at that company pretty well. We just had a very different style, the CEO and myself, and we could agree on virtually nothing. Certainly, I got the worst job performance reviews of my life at that company, which is fine. I mean, something's going to be the worst, right?
But did you feel like that was stalling your career, that you were...
Yes, that was a total waste of my life. Being at that company when I could have joined so many other companies, it boggles my mind. Not that I made the choice, but that's where I ended up. Of all the exciting companies starting in those days, why I chose to go there, I don't remember specifically. I'm sure I was panicked about finding something, which I shouldn't have been. I made a series of bad choices that led me to that company, that led me to stay there. I did not stay there for that long. It wasn't 3.5 years. It was way less than that. It was, I don't know if I was there even a year, quite frankly. I don't even know where I would look if it's not related. It's important to not always move straight up in the world, right? It's important to have setbacks. That's, I think, what this podcast is about. That was a brutal setback. Imagine going from Lending Tree, which is a rocket ship by that point, to running your own thing, which had trials and tribulations, but was an incredible learning experience. Then you are stuck in this crappy, poorly run company, which again, I don't want to take zero blame here. I was not into it. I was not enthusiastic. I was not in line with the direction that the CEO wanted to go, and I didn't agree with him on virtually anything. And so it was mercifully cut short.
What did you do after?
I think I went to Recycle Bank. I think I
So you had some gap.
A few companies. I forgot the gap. Is this a review of my resume? Is this what this podcast is called? Let's review your resume on a podcast.
I take the gap as something you want to hide, and that's where the meat is.
That's right. Okay, well, that's fair. I'm sure that's right,
well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's a good idea. I like that.
Unfortunately, because you're so old, we're like halfway through your resume.
No, that's the problem. Seriously. Exactly. I consulted for a few small software companies. I worked on one business idea for myself that I was thinking about starting.
What happened to that?
I did a bunch of research on that. I talked to a lot of people. I like the idea, but I guess I would say now I didn't totally feel strong enough about the product market fit to pursue it. I thought it was interesting, but not worth spending some portion of the rest of my life on. I consulted for workforce management company, which was like scheduling and things like scheduling employees. And then I went to Recycle Bank.
You went to Recycle Bank and took the role as president. Talk to me about joining that company. Did it feel like you were getting back on track?
Yeah. So I was recruited so I said that Right Freight Rely software is backed by RRE. So RRE called me and said, we're investing in this really incredibly exciting new company, and you should come check it out. In a nutshell, is rewarding people for environmental actions. the action we focused on was recycling to start. We expanded from there, but it was how to reward people to do good things for the environment. The idea was really great. And the founder was a really smart guy, very focused on doing the right thing for the environment. I liked the business idea. I thought it was interesting. And I met the CEO and I really liked him and thought he was genuine. And I met one of the early investors or advisors at Columbia Business School and liked him. And so, but it was really my trust in RE more so than anything else. I wasn't a diehard environmentalist. That's not why I joined the company, but I did trust the RE guys. And again, I met the CEO. I liked him. And so it seemed like, okay, this is a great way to get back on track here. This company is doing some interesting things. And I am certain that I could take my experience and help grow and scale the company, which I was fortunate enough to do for a while.
What challenges did you face while there?
Oh gosh, so many. We did grow that company pretty significantly. So we had raised a lot of money from RE, from Kleiner Perkins, from several other very large firms. We were known at the time as one of the most exciting and interesting companies out there. The fundamental idea was, talking about product market fit, I don't think there's ever been better product market fit that you have. We sold to municipalities and we would go in there and say to the mayor of a city, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Mayor, do you want to roll out this program that's going to reward your constituents for recycling? So you're going to be able to spread these great rewards across the city. You're going to save money on landfills. You're going to get this material back into the system. It's just such a win-win-win across the board that it was just an incredibly graceful product and idea, and in many ways, very easy to sell to the mayors and to the cities. Selling to municipalities is not easy, but the fundamental idea was just so attractive that it was really interesting. And then, as you know, because a lot of the OLO execs came from Recycle Bank, I did that with a lot of people who turned out to be incredible colleagues and do, a great job. And there we were able to hire some just amazingly talented executives. And that company had some fundamental issues which showed up at scale, but getting to that scale, that company did an incredible job. At the end of the day, again, there's some things that led the company to fail. I don't even know if it's still around. And that, just in a nutshell, is most people don't care about recycling or taking environmental actions.
Why did you leave?
I left after the CEO and founder was shown the door. We brought in a guy who had been in the ad tech world. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze at that point. We had questions about the long-term viability of the model. We had questions about the viability of the new exec and the people he brought in around him. It just, time to go. Sometimes it's just time to leave.
Did you feel frustrated? Did you feel like it was another setback?
No, I didn't feel it was another setback. At that point, I wasn't concerned about finding something next. I felt like I had done my best to make the company successful, and we had reached a certain point of success, but that it was never going to make it past where it was. When the board decided to hire a new CEO, half the board, came to me and said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "No." And when we brought a new CEO in, I didn't think that person was the right person. I think that proved to be the case. But I should say that none of the execs who met that person thought they were the right person. The board decided to bring them in anyhow.
You went from Recycle Bank as president to Payphone as COO.
Yep.
Talk to me
Yes.
about the transition.
Payphone, now called Prove.com, was visionary in the mobile authentication space. However, when I joined that company, we were doing carrier billing. So if you bought a ringtone on a Verizon phone, payphone would help bill for that product. The job was interesting, but not challenging because the company was not of any interesting scale at the time. My job was to help grow and scale the company, hire people, create processes, etc. But the opportunity was relatively limited because we were still searching for product market fit. So I was probably a luxury hire at the time, right? We were not, it wasn't that we weren't big enough to afford me, but the company wasn't big enough to need me. My skill set far superseded the the pace in which the company was growing and the stage in which it was at. And it just became not particularly challenging on a day-to-day basis.
Were you bored?
Yes. I was fortunate that Roger included me in everything. I sat in an office with him, but I can only add so much to conversations between software engineers and mobile phone engineers. My skill set was not particularly useful to that company at that time. I'm grateful to have learned a lot. Some of the stuff I learned at Payphone, what I learned about that business has been helpful in other areas. And there were other things I learned there that have been helpful as I've grown and scaled companies since then. Really just one, Olo. I'd first been recruited by Noah when I was working at Payphone because I knew Noah like I knew Roger, as I mentioned before, through RRE. But I wasn't interested in leaving Payphone originally when Noah approached me. But by the time he approached me the second time, I realized that Olo was in the right place. The time was right. The board was focused on the direction they wanted to go in. The timing for me at Payphone wasn't there yet, that we're still struggling with product market fit. The company didn't need me. And I felt like time to move to a place where I think they're going to need my skill set over time to build a business.
Do you think the CEO saw it that way?
I think so. I'm not sure I've ever asked him that question. I think he did. Yeah, I would say he did. He's a super smart guy. I think he liked having me around and someone he could brainstorm ideas with. But I can't imagine that he didn't agree.
So not today, but back then, did you feel like you shouldn't have taken that job? Despite things that you took from it, did it feel like just a random placeholder that you could have done more with somewhere else?
Yeah, I'd say in retrospect, for sure. That's a couple years there that I could have done something else.
Noah was actively recruiting you to join Olo, and you're wrong place, right time in terms of being available and interested. So you joined Olo as COO. What were the challenges you faced there?
That company, as you're well aware, DM, had been around for, I don't know, 5 years or so and had not grown particularly. There was 10 people, sort of stuck on 10 people for quite a while with a limited number of customers, but had the DNA of the challenges were taking Noah's vision, which had always been quite strong, and building a company around that. There was product market fit, so it was different from Payphone. Now it was just being proven by some of the early innovators in the restaurant world. So we were just closing Five Guys and other brands like that, but the product market fit was clear. The fact that restaurants are laggards to adopt technology was helpful because I think we all knew it would happen. It would happen in every other retail vertical. So why would e-commerce, digital ordering not happen in restaurants? It did. We knew it was going to. So the timing was great because I think even though the company was small, it was time from Noah's perspective and from the board's perspective to begin to build the infrastructure to support a much larger company. And as you know, I walked in the door with two other great execs, both of whom worked with me at Recycle Bank. And the reason I think the board and Noah made that decision to hire 3 very senior people when there were only 10 total prior to that was because they knew that the wave was cresting in the ocean and the ride was going to begin soon enough.
Obviously, the company went to achieve great success when I left 750 employees and I left slightly after you. Why did you leave Ola?
I was sick and tired of managing you. Man, talk about someone. I left Olo because some point, I think there's several reasons. Number one, I've been there 9 years. That's longer than I've ever been anywhere, probably by a factor of two. I had met all the challenges that had been placed in front of me, and we had succeeded wildly, I suppose, beyond what we could have ever guessed. And that's a great feeling. But I felt as though I wanted to go challenge myself somewhere else. Eventually, the challenges dissipate and you get bored somewhere. And I think once that happens, you're doing a massive disservice to the company to stay. And I believe the companies need new blood and new ideas and new ways to think about challenges. And I think it is the right thing to leave a company at a certain time. I had hired a great team below me and just an incredible set of execs that would continue on at the company that still had the founder and CEO. And so the time was right. The time is just right. Like at a certain point, it doesn't make any more sense. I like moving on. I like new challenges. I like learning new verticals. I like starting over. I guess that's why I've done so many startups. Some have been really great. One or two have been pretty horrific, but that happens. I regret some of the moves I made, but long-term, those things tend to smooth out over time.
If you could go back and speak to your 20-ish year old self, what advice would you give?
Drink more. I'm fortunate enough that I get to go back and speak to my 20-ish year old self all the time because I have two sons who are in their 20s. So I do try to impart those lessons I've learned over time to them. And I think the major lesson is your working life is going to go on for a long time and you can't panic. You need to stick it out and you need to focus on what's important, but focus on working hard and working through the challenges of a job and sticking with it. I stuck with some jobs probably too long, but I think today people tend to depart too soon. And there's something to be said with just learning how to make it through challenges, whether created by your boss or by the company or by yourself. Your working life is a huge portion of your life, and you can't look every day and say, okay, how am I feeling today? Should I quit today? You need to spend some time at a place and not jump at the next thing.
We're going to jump to rapid fire questions.
No, I would not rehire you.
How do you define success?
I guess just the feeling of satisfaction when you look back at a particular role. Did I enjoy what I did? Was I challenged? I don't define it as a particular monetary outcome. Did I like the people I worked with? Do I keep in touch with the people I worked with at the time? I tend to think about that a lot. My colleagues, my customers, were they happy with what I sold them in the sense that it helped their lives?
What was your dream job as a child?
Probably as a kid, probably fireman or something like that, but then certainly would have been basketball player. So yeah, it seems unfortunate. My jump shot was just a little bit not good enough. What can I say?
If you could switch jobs with anyone, who would you switch jobs with? Or what job would you be doing?
Maybe LeBron James. I don't think the Lakers would be too happy about that.
Remote or in-person work?
I think you know the answer, Dan. In person. I understand remote, but I think people who work physically close to each other just get way more done, and subtleties are lost in a remote world. And I know we'll never go back to that, and I'm comfortable with that. But all things being equal, I would have all employees of one company in one place.
Item on your desk you cannot live without.
Picture my wife and kids.
Oh, there's that teddy bear. What actor would you have play you in a movie?
Oh, I don't think if you ask people who know me for a long time, there'd be no question. It would be Nicolas Cage, because I've been confused with him several times in the past. That poor guy. I feel horrible for him.
What company on your resume has turned the most heads, or said differently, what makes other companies and recruiters want to reach out?
Oh, Olo, for sure.
Label 3 of your jobs. Love, ultimate fun. Skip it.
Oh, skip it's easy. I can spell that out. Give you the name of the CEO. What were the other 2 categories?
Love
it
and ultimate fun.
love it. Ultimate fun. I guess loved Olo. Ultimate fun. I'm waiting for that one.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to dive into your career and help normalize that career is a journey and it's not immediate fast track success. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reiner. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and/or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.